Okay, so far we have been studying balance laws and we have not said a single thing about the material of the body. So from today onwards, we are going to talk about constitutive relations. So these constitutive relations some people don't like these words, they say material model. So both of them mean the same thing. So we are going to study constitutive relations or material model. So our basic hypothesis is that these balance equations must be satisfied. So I'm writing these in the reference configuration. So rho 0 vi dot and rho 0 e dot equals minus ql comma l plus ti l tilde f dot il plus rho 0 r. You have these in your notes, so you don't need to copy them again. So you have these in your notes probably more than once. We wrote them. Okay. So these are in the reference configuration. Of course, we will need initial conditions and boundary conditions. A solution of these equations subject to the given initial and boundary conditions is called, I think yesterday I said thermodynamics, I should say thermomechanical, is called a thermomechanical process. So a solution of these equations is called a thermomechanical process. However, only those thermomechanical processes are admissible that satisfy the entropy inequality. And if we write the entropy inequality in the, I'm going to write it, so don't get mad that I took it away. In the reference configuration is phi dot plus theta eta plus eta theta dot minus TIL tilde F dot IL plus QL theta comma L over theta is less than or equal to 0. So that's the reduced entropy inequality in the reference configuration. Okay. And yesterday or day before yesterday also, we wrote this in the present configuration. But the one I wrote here is in the reference configuration. Okay, now, even though I said we can solve these equations, but if you look at the equations, the number of equations is 1 here, 3 here, and 3 here, and 1 here. So we have 3 plus 3, 6 plus 1, 7 plus 1, 8 equations. And how many unknowns do we have? Our unknowns are rho, v, TIL, and E theta Q. So we have 1 plus 3, 4 plus 9, 13, 14, 15, and 3, 18. So we are lacking a lot of information. If you count these, we have 18. 1, 3 components of velocity, that makes 4. 9 components of first Euler-Kirchhoff stress tensor, it is not symmetric. So 9 plus 4, 13. Internal energy 14. Temperature 15. And the heat flux, 3 components, 18. So we need 10 more equations. Are we right? So we need a lot of equations. So that is what is going to define a material. So we are going to say a material point in a body is defined by these relations. The first Euler-Kirchhoff stress tensor at the point X. Now remember, X is the material point we are talking about. So X is the name of a material point. Like X could be my name or your name. So it identifies a material point in the body. So the first Euler-Kirchhoff stress tensor at a material point, on the right hand side, even though I'm putting TIL, this is a function, and the left hand side is the value. That's what we have been doing all along. So it depends upon F. That's the deformation gradient at the point X at time t. So you find the strain or the deformation gradient at point X at time t. You find the temperature at point X at time t. And you find the temperature gradient, so G. So G here is the derivative of temperature with respect to big X. So a material point is called thermoelastic So now we are classifying materials into different categories. So what we are doing now is talking about an elastic material. And since we are considering temperatures, so we are saying it's thermoelastic. Now Jessica is worried or confused. We did not see elastic materials like that before. Okay. So this is a wide class of materials. It includes steel, copper, rubber, tissues, soft tissue, our muscles. So all materials that satisfy this relation plus a few more I'm going to write now. So heat flux Q is also a function of F, theta, and G. All of these are evaluated at point X and time t. I did not write those on. The entropy and the internal energy so all the unknowns we have, they depend upon the present value of the deformation gradient, present value of the temperature, and the present value of the temperature gradient. So a material that obeys these relations, these equations, is called thermoelastic. Does this material have any memory? does this material have any memory? Memory means, does it remember anything from the past? That's what I mean by memory. Does it remember anything from the past? She's saying no, right? Anybody who agrees with her? So he's saying no. So you got a few votes, 3, 4. Does this material remember anything of the past? Yes, Josh?
It's thermoelastic, not thermoplastic, so yes.
It remembers?
Elastic, yes.
Well, we are talking about thermoelastic materials, right? So we are talking about thermoelastic materials. So, well, we have 1 vote against you. Anybody who agrees with Josh? Okay. This is a very strange material. It remembers nothing of the past except the reference configuration. It does not remember what happened to it a minute ago, a second ago, an hour ago, or 24 hours ago. However, it remembers the reference configuration. Just 1 second. Because to find the deformation gradient F, we need to differentiate with respect to big X. To find the deformation gradient F, we need to differentiate little x with respect to big X. So all we need to know is the present configuration and the reference configuration. So if we are given the reference configuration omega 0 and we somehow are in the present configuration, it's like my walking from Norris Hall to this room. All thermoelastic material remembers is where I am now and where I was to start with. How I got here is immaterial. Whether I got here in 24 hours or 1 million years makes no difference. Okay? So this material is very strange in that sense. It does not remember anything in between. But it remembers the reference configuration you take. So the point is, all of these relations we are writing, they will depend upon the choice of reference configuration. Yes, I think you had a question.
When you use the word remember, what do you mean? I mean, is there a definition for the memory of a material?
What do you mean by the English language word memory?
I mean, you're going to have to define the word for the class. I mean, everyone has a different definition of what they think it means.
Okay, let's figure it out. How many of you, what do you mean by the word memory? Anyone will volunteer? Okay, you tell me what you mean by the word memory.
I'm going to assume you mean...
No, give me the English dictionary meaning. Not assume, just give me the English dictionary meaning.
A record of what has happened in the past.
Right, exactly. So that's what it is. So there is no record of what happened in the past except from where you started and where you ended up. Which path you took is immaterial. So there's no record of the path. Okay? Does that jive up with the definition you just gave me? So there's no record of the path in this case. There are materials, like Josh was referring to plastic materials. In plasticity, which we are not talking about, we will not talk about, the stress depends upon not only from where you started, where you ended up, but on the path you took. Okay, so that material has memory. What about Navier-Stokes fluid? Navier-Stokes, how many of you have, well, I guess, even if you have not heard, because I have said the word Navier-Stokes many times in the class, so I cannot say if you have not heard of it. So what about the Navier-Stokes fluid? Does it have any memory? And again, we are referring to the definition you gave me. Does Navier-Stokes fluid have a memory? Josh?
I don't know fluids.
You don't know. But you drink fluid every day. You could not be surviving without drinking fluids, right? None of us can survive without fluids. So our body has basically 80–90% fluid. Okay, she's drinking fluid, so we cannot say that we don't know fluids. So does Navier-Stokes fluid have a memory? The answer is yes or no. Francis will tell us. No? You don't want to tell us. Ganesh?
I think no.
You think no? The answer is yes. It has memory. It has a very short memory. Very short. And that short can be 1 microsecond, 1 millisecond, 1 nanosecond, 1 femtosecond, because the stress depends upon strain rate. And to find strain rate, you need to know things at 2 different times. Since we do not know future, so we need to know the past. So if I were a fluid, I need to know not only where I am now, but where I was a little while ago, a tiny moment ago, just enough to find the derivatives, first derivative. So it has a very short memory. But it doesn't care about the reference configuration unless the fluid happens to be compressible. If it is incompressible, then it doesn't care about the reference configuration. All it cares about is where it is now and where it was a moment ago. Incompressible Navier-Stokes. And if it is compressible, then it cares about the reference configuration as well as where it was a moment ago. Now, our friend, Fred Cook, does experiments, and what he does, he takes this bar, like a composite bar, and he pulls it, so he stretches it by, say, 10%, and then he holds it there. So that's not part of the class, that music. Okay. So he holds it there and watches the load change. And that he calls that as a stress relaxation experiment. What will happen in this case? If I have this material, the ones we wrote on the screen here, this thermoelastic material, and I do that experiment. So I take this specimen, I'm assuming it is made of a thermoelastic material, and I pull it by 10%, temperature is constant, and the heat flux is, and the temperature gradient is 0. So I'm doing the stress relaxation test that Fred does, but on this material. So what will happen to the stress? Yes, Fred?
The stress will not change?
Stress will not change. This material does not exhibit, does not show any stress relaxation phenomena. Okay? Also, we did not say that these quantities, the stress, heat flux, etc., depend upon time explicitly. There is no explicit dependence upon time. Time comes into picture only because F depends upon X and time. But otherwise, there is no time dependence. If you don't change F, you don't change theta, you don't change G, you cannot change T. You cannot change heat flux, you cannot change E, you cannot change eta, you cannot change Helmholtz free energy. For this material, so this is special class of materials. And fortunately, there are millions of them. So our life is not empty. Like this set is not empty. So there are materials that exhibit this phenomena. So it's not an empty set. Otherwise, you will be saying, I'm wasting your time. No, this is a rich set, which rich means there are many materials that obey these relations. And most of us have used them. Okay, now you have been doing homework problems. And one of the exercises you have been doing is the following. You have been given the stress field, and sometimes you have been given the acceleration also. And the assignment has been to find the body force so that the balance of linear momentum is satisfied. Right? So that's what we are going to assume now. That we are given these functions, which means we are given a material, and you can choose any F you like, means any deformation gradient you like, any temperature you like, any temperature field you like, and therefore you get a temperature gradient field, and you plug those in, you get these values of quantities, you plug those values in this here, and in here, and you can find the body force and the supply of internal energy to satisfy these balance laws. Okay? So there is no risk. This idea what I'm just talking about is roughly 50 years old. So we have made progress. We went from 200 years ago to roughly 100 years ago, and now we are 50 years ago. And unfortunately, we will not advance anymore. So we will stay in 1960s era. That's the maximum we will advance in time, as far as the advances in continuum mechanics are concerned. Okay, so this idea, what I'm talking about now, is roughly speaking 50 years old. It's not mine. It's due to Coleman and Knoll. Unfortunately, both of them are alive. These are two different persons. Bernie Coleman is one person and Walter Knoll is another person. And incidentally, Walter Knoll did finish his PhD in a couple of years. And not only he finished his PhD in 2 years, actually he wrote his dissertation, which was considered to be a classic work, kind of Bible, but not quite. That's why I said kind of, right? So he finished his work like PhD in 2 years. And, pardon? He did his PhD at Johns Hopkins University with Clifford Truesdell. And I think he was probably Clifford Truesdell's first student. And Truesdell, in his life of roughly 80 years, of which 40 years is academic, produced only 5 PhDs, 4 or 5. I think 5. My memory could be wrong, but it's something like 5. If it's not 5, it could be 6 or could be 4. But it's between 5 and 6 most likely. So, okay. Anyway, so I think Walter Knoll was one of his first PhD students. So Coleman was not his advisor. Coleman is a separate, like different person. So that's about the history part. I don't know from where Coleman got his PhD. Most probably at Brown, but I may be wrong. I don't remember from where Coleman got his degree. I mean, I got my degree at Johns Hopkins too, but my advisor was not Truesdell. And my advisor produced about, I think 12 PhDs in his 40 years. So there was no such thing as pressure to produce PhDs. I mean, the school, there was no such thing as how many PhD students you have and how many PhDs you have produced or advised. But these days, it's the opposite. It's the upside down. So, okay. So this thermoelastic material is very strange. It remembers the reference configuration, but nothing in between, and it does not exhibit stress relaxation. Also, as we said, we can find the body force and the supply of internal energy to satisfy the balance laws. So the only thing left is really to make sure that this entropy inequality is satisfied. And that's what Coleman and Knoll proposed, that you can take any deformation field you like, you can find the body force and the internal energy, and therefore you don't have to worry about the balance laws. All you need to make sure is that the entropy inequality or the second law of thermodynamics is satisfied. So let us see what the second law of thermodynamics says now. So if we take the second law of thermodynamics, and actually incidentally in that era, like 1970s, there was no such thing as writing a project report. Because whenever I did my work, my advisor never asked me to write a project report. All he said was, at the end, just say that this work was funded by the NSF. No grant number, nothing. So his project report was he will staple all these papers and send it to the NSF. And the proposal was only 1 page or 2 pages. So things have changed, of course, totally. Okay, so let's take this entropy inequality and find phi dot. So phi is a function of f, theta, and g. So phi dot will be delta phi over delta FIL dot plus delta phi over delta theta dot plus delta phi over delta GL dot. So that's the chain rule of calculus. Minus TIL tilde FIL dot plus QL theta comma L over theta is less than or equal to 0. So that's what the entropy inequality or the second law of thermodynamics says. It must be satisfied. And you will not find this treatment in many continuum mechanics books. So you are more or less stuck to a few books if you want to read this material. Okay, so now let's combine this. This is a F dot term. This is F dot term. Oh, I forgot. Shoot. I did not copy one more term here. That's eta theta dot. Sorry. Plus rho 0 eta theta dot. It's here. I just forgot to copy it. It's good that my memory is not that bad, because if I had lost memory, I would not have figured out I missed the term. So I'm not an elastic material. So this term, these two terms we can combine. So if we combine them, then what do we get? We get rho 0 delta phi over delta FIL minus TIL tilde F dot IL plus rho 0, actually it's a common factor, delta phi over delta theta plus eta theta dot plus rho 0 delta phi over delta GIL dot plus QL theta comma L over theta is less than or equal to 0. So all we are doing is combining the terms that have F dot in it and that have theta dot in it. Okay. So now if you remember the definition of an thermoelastic material, the stresses, heat flux, internal energy, entropy, Helmholtz free energy, they depend upon F, theta, and G, not F dot, not theta dot, not G dot. So I fix F fix theta and fix g. Choose anything you like. Okay. Katie, you have a question?
No.
Okay. So choose any f you like, any theta you like, any g you like, and you have these values. But f dot, theta dot, and g dot, they do appear in this entropy inequality. So I can choose any f dot I like. And if I choose f dot, I can choose it such that my inequality is violated. I can choose theta dot to violate the inequality. Remember, this has to be less than or equal to 0. So I can make theta dot anything I want. I can make g dot anything I want, and I can violate the inequality. So what do I have to have not to violate the inequality? Yes? No? Okay, I will repeat. Given f, theta and g, these quantities are fixed now, the ones I am putting in the box. And of course, this one is also fixed. Given f, theta and g, the quantities in the boxes are fixed. Their values cannot be changed. However, I can change f dot, theta dot, and g dot any way I like. So what should be the values of the quantities in the box, in some of the boxes, so that I don't violate the inequality? Am I making sense? So if I multiply 0 with something, what do I get? So long as I multiply 0 with something finite, I get 0. So if this thing is 0, it matters nothing what I take for f dot. I cannot violate the inequality then. Right? Same thing about this one. Same thing about this one. That's why I use the word sum, because this thing does not multiply f dot, this one does not multiply theta dot, this one does not multiply g dot. So there is no way I can change this one by changing f dot, theta dot, or g dot. So therefore, TIL must equal rho 0 delta phi I over delta FIL, and eta must equal delta phi over delta theta, and delta phi over delta GIL must be 0. So this implies that phi is really a function of f and theta. It cannot depend upon the temperature gradient. G is temperature gradient. G is temperature gradient. Okay. If the derivative with respect to temperature gradient is 0, that means it cannot depend upon the temperature gradient. Oh, I think I made it. There is no I here. There is only just GL. So I can read her face, but she's shy not to tell me that there is a problem. That I index was superfluous. It's really GL, temperature gradient. That's only one, like I say, it has 3 components. So if the derivative of the Helmholtz free energy with respect to temperature gradient is 0, that means it does not depend upon temperature gradient. Remember, we started with the assumption that P depends upon temperature gradient. Now let us see if the Helmholtz free energy cannot depend upon temperature gradient. What about the Cauchy's? What about the first Piola-Graph stress tensor? What about the first Piola-Graph stress tensor? Can the first Piola-Graph stress tensor depend upon temperature gradient? Anyone at Wake Forest? Samitha, Catherine, Mr. Wu?
I'm not sure.
Well, just take a guess. None of the people here are sure either, so let's.
Yes.
So okay, I'm sorry, I forgot. Yes, this is So does sorry, let me rephrase my question. Can the first Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor depend upon temperature gradient? No. Now, Josh said no, and he's right. The first Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor is the derivative of Helmholtz free energy with respect to the deformation gradient. If the Helmholtz free energy cannot depend upon temperature gradient, how can the first Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor depend upon it? It cannot. Okay? So even though we assumed in our definition of a thermoelastic material that the stress tensor can depend upon temperature gradient, entropy inequality says no, or the second law of thermodynamics says no. Your assumption was wrong. Okay? Also, the entropy eta cannot depend upon temperature gradient. So the entropy inequality is powerful in that sense. It says whether you are going on the right path or wrong path. It has saved Fred a lot of work, because otherwise he will have to find stresses for different values of temperature gradients. And no, he does not have to do it. Right? Because stress does not depend upon temperature gradient. It only depends upon temperature and the deformation gradient. And we are talking about thermoelastic materials. Okay? If you change the class of materials, then things may change. For a thermoelastic material, the stress cannot depend upon temperature gradient, entropy cannot depend upon temperature gradient, and the Helmholtz free energy cannot depend upon temperature gradient. Okay, so what are we left with then? So this is 0, this is 0, this is 0. So what we are left with is then QL theta comma L must be less than or equal to 0. The absolute temperature theta is positive, so I can multiply both sides by theta, and doesn't change anything. So the left hand side is a scalar, and let me denote it by alpha. Alpha is not an index. It's just to write QL theta comma L, so that I don't have to write the whole thing again. So what is the maximum value of alpha? 0. Very good. And when does it occur? For what value of the temperature gradient has alpha maximum value? The answer is on the chalkboard or the screen. For what value of the temperature gradient does alpha have a maximum value? You know what is temperature gradient? Theta comma L.
0.
0. So when the temperature gradient is 0, alpha is 0. So alpha has the maximum value. And calculus says that if you differentiate this with respect to theta comma L, so let's write it that GL. So GL is theta comma L. And evaluate this at GL equal to 0, I should get. Jessica is willing to tell us. No, alpha is, it should be equal to 0. And what about the second derivative? And I evaluate that at GL equal to, let's make that L to M so that you don't confuse this GL with that GL. So what should be the second derivative then? So what should be the second derivative? If you don't remember, so let's say f of x, its maximum value is at a 0, so that's if you expand this in terms of Taylor series, you get 0 x f prime at 0 plus x square over 2 f double prime 0. So this quantity we said is 0, so that goes away. If this is maximum at 0, what should be this quantity then? If f of x is maximum at 0, what should be the sign of f double prime? Negative. So this thing should be then negative definite. So what this means is that if you multiply it by any scale, any vector, zeta m, zeta n, you should get less than or equal to 0. See, there is no point in writing a matrix less than or equal to 0, because if you gm, gn, if you differentiate, you get 9 quantities. And I cannot say 9 quantities are negative. There is no such thing as saying 9 quantities, each one of them is negative. So what it means is that that matrix, its eigenvalues of this matrix should be all non-positive, should be either 0 or negative. Okay, now, so let's carry out this exercise. So what does this tell us? So if we differentiate QL, theta, if we differentiate this with respect to GM, the first term we get is delta QL over delta GM, theta comma L. Second term we get is QL. So if I differentiate theta comma L with respect to theta comma M, what will I get? This thing is the same. This thing is GL. So if I differentiate GL with respect to GM, what do I get? If I differentiate x with respect to x, I get 1. If I differentiate x with respect to y, I get 0. So I will get delta LM. And then we need to evaluate the whole thing at g equal to 0. We need to evaluate the whole thing at g equal to 0. So what do we get then? G equal to 0 means the first term vanishes because we have theta comma L here. So what we get then is that Qm, which was a function of f, theta, and now we are evaluating at g equal to 0. If you set g equal to 0, the first term vanishes because this is g. If you set g equal to 0, you are setting this thing equal to 0. Therefore, the first term vanishes. So if you evaluate now q at g equal to 0, we should get 0. So what it says is that if there is no temperature gradient, there is no heat flux. So in a thermoelastic material, you cannot produce heat flux just by deforming it. You must have a temperature gradient. Thermoelastic material. Thermoelastic. I'm not talking about all materials. So don't take this word as gospel. It is only for a thermoelastic material. Right? So stay with a thermoelastic material. For a thermoelastic material, there is no heat flux in the absence of temperature gradient. No temperature gradient means no heat flux. And Fourier law of heat conduction says that too. Because Fourier law of heat conduction says that the heat flux is proportional to the temperature gradient. So if there is no temperature gradient, there is no heat flux. However, this we are deriving from the entropy inequality. So what this one says is then is the following, that Qm, which is a function of f, theta, and g, must be something like this. So K, M, N, K, can be a function of G and Gn. So it must be something like this. If you expand in terms of Taylor series, if you expand Q in terms of Taylor series with respect to G, the first term is 0, and this is the next. The other terms will have G in it. So in this one, if G is 0, Q is 0. And K, incidentally, is called thermal conductivity. It's really, in our case, it's a thermal conductivity tensor. This one maps vectors onto vectors. So it's a second order tensor. Now Josh Strangler, when he tests his laminates, so K there, this matrix K, he doesn't do thermal conductivity experiments. He does only mechanical tests. I think none of you in this room probably do. Oh, one of you did DSC tests, like heat flux you measure trying. So you did some caloric tests, but not you, I know. So this thermal conductivity, if you are testing a laminate, like a composite material, it has, at this time it has 9 components. Because we did not say anything about whether it's symmetric or not symmetric, all we are saying it is second order tensor. So thermal conductivity in X direction need not equal thermal conductivity in Y direction, need not equal thermal conductivity in Z direction. And you can also have off-diagonal components at this stage of the game. Unless you assume something more, you may or may not have off-diagonal components. But at this stage of the game, you do. Okay, so one more thing and then I will quit. Yes?
Yeah, for simplicity, you consider that it's just multiplied by Gn and not Gn squared or cubed?
Oh, those are included. They are not ruled out. Because K depends upon G. So it could be G squared, G cubed, G fourth. I mean, all those terms are included. So we did not put a here 0 here, right? So we are not saying that Q is a linear function of G. All we are saying is, since the heat flux vanishes when the temperature gradient vanishes, therefore Q must be of this type. But there can be complicated expressions here we don't know yet. Any other question on your mind? Okay, so let's use one more and then we will quit. So let's evaluate the second derivatives of alpha. So delta square alpha over delta Gm, delta Gn. Now remember, alpha is QL GL. And we already evaluated the first derivative here. So now we need to evaluate the second derivative. So that will be delta square QL over delta Gm Gn GL plus delta QL over delta Gm delta Ln plus delta QL over delta Gn delta Ln. And we need to evaluate all of this when G is 0. So we need to evaluate all of this when G is 0. Okay? So the first term will vanish because G is 0. And the second term, if we obey this, or if we say this is true, which is true, of course, that's what the entropy inequality gave us. So that says then that K, incidentally, this is going to be Nm. No, because Ln, this L and this L is summed, and this is Kronecker delta, so that's going to change that L to N. So that will give us then minus k nm evaluated at f, theta and 0 minus k mn evaluated at f, theta and 0, this quantity must be negative definite, must be negative semi-definite. Semi means half. So it's halfway between positive and negative, which means it can be 0 also. That's why the word semi is there, not semi is because we have here less than or equal to 0. I'm almost done, just I have to change the sign and then I will be done. So if we change the sign, what will happen to this negative then? So if you change the sign, you have to change the sign everywhere. So you are making negative as positive. So the thermal conductivity tensor, this is like Knm plus Kmn. The symmetric part of the thermal conductivity tensor must be positive definite. The entropy inequality does not say anything about the asymmetric part of the thermal conductivity tensor. Sometimes you might see in a book on Songer's relation. As far as I know, well, I really should say this way. Truswell taught me that there is no such thing as on Songer's relation. This is an assumption that thermal conductivity tensor is symmetric. So if you assume thermal conductivity tensor is symmetric, then the thermal conductivity tensor is positive definite. All of its eigenvalues must be positive, or it can be 0. It cannot be there cannot be a negative eigenvalue of a thermal conductivity tensor, assuming it is symmetric. And that's what the entropy inequality says. Okay. So the lesson learned from entropy inequality is the following: that if you know the free energy density, if you know the Helmholtz free energy density, then you get first Piola-Kirchhoff's test tensor, you get the entropy, and the Helmholtz free energy cannot depend upon temperature gradient. There can be no heat flux without having a temperature gradient. So that's what this equation is. No heat flux, no temperature gradient, no heat flux. And the thermal conductivity tensor must be positive, evaluated at 0 temperature gradient. Must be positive semi-definite. Okay, so we will pick it up from here. Ask Mr. Lowe, I don't think he gave me that. I will check it again, but see, if he says he doesn't have it, then I will have to find it out where it is. He may have given, most likely he has not given it, but I don't know.